Here's the truth. You probably won't lose a lot of money because you bought a bad rental property. You're actually much more likely to lose a lot of money because you bought a decent rental, but then you managed it badly. Poor communication, tenant issues that fester into huge disasters, not tracking financials, not paying attention to expenses. All of these are things that turn little simple issues that can be worked out into big problems that can wipe out years of cash flow all in one shot. And from managing hundreds of units over the past decade, I've seen these things happen time and time and time again. In this video, we're going to talk about strategies to mitigate the risk on your rentals so that problems like this don't turn into big disasters that bleed out your portfolio. Let's get into it.
Welcome to video 6, where we're going to talk about risk mitigation. So these properties, you're an investor. You own these properties. They are your assets. They are securing your financial well-being for your future generations. So you want to make sure that you are taking care of them and mitigating any possible risks that could hurt the asset and lose you money. So we're going to go through and give you some suggestions on how you can mitigate that risk. Tyrone, anything you want to say about that?
Just want to say this is extremely important because the best place to be mitigating risk is from a proactive position, having measures in place that are going to help you mitigate the risk as opposed to responding to issues and then trying to mitigate losses from the issue, right? That's where a lot of people find themselves because they don't proactively think about these issues that we're going to run through. So know that we're bringing this to you from experience of managing hundreds of properties, right? In different areas from Class A to Class C and rough areas. We've seen properties across the board with many types of tenants. And we're going to talk to you about the most common things that you want to be aware of and you want to make sure you're covered for.
Okay, our first risk mitigation strategy, you guessed it, consistent communication.
Here we go. That we've included it in here a number of times for a reason. We don't want you to write it off. We don't want you to take it for granted. Okay, check that box, communication. Just know that from a risk mitigation standpoint, the communication is going to enable you to spot issues early. It doesn't mean that communication keeps things from happening. It just means that you're going to see the cues. You're going to know that something's not right early so that you can pivot. You can manage the situation in a way to mitigate your losses as opposed to big issues developing in silence. And then they become this massive problem that you then have to try to dig your way out of. So communication again.
Next, you are going to want to make sure that you're filing any notices to the tenant as promptly, as quickly as possible.
And from experience, we have seen the effectiveness that this has. And these notices are going to be aligned with the terms of your lease, right? So obviously, if a tenant's not paying rent on time, sending reminders, these things can be programmed in the property management system that we talked about if you get the right system. So
can you give a couple other examples other than delinquent rent?
So delinquent rent, if you find that the tenant is violating the terms of the lease in some way, again, that constant communication. Examples, there's people living in the property who shouldn't be there. The tenant has pets and there's no lease, there's no allowance for that on the lease, right? The tenants are doing things in the property that you don't approve of or that are not allowed for in the lease. All these things are things that you may not have ever heard of if you didn't have that communication. Once that happens, you want to document it and you want to send them a written communication basically saying, hey, it has become aware to me as of this date that this is taking place. If this is not in alignment with the terms of the lease, it needs to cease, or, you at least let them know that they're on notice and they either have to stop it or you have to work out a situation whereby you update the lease or you allow them to do that. For the pet, for instance, you might say, you can keep the pet, but I want a pet deposit, or you have to pay pet rent now, right? So that notice is to quit. If tenants not paying rent and rent is late, it's easy to get into the cycle of tenants continually paying rent late. And that gets minimized when you're filing notices and you're sending these notices. They know that they're serious about collecting rent. You should be, because it's the livelihood of your property and your business. So they get that notice, and a legal notice does work like nothing else in terms of inspiring somebody to action. So all the other things that they're prioritizing, overpaying their rent will bump into number one when they get that legal notice. Again, it's just sending that message. Hey, I'm serious about my property. I'm serious about my business. I'm serious about my money. This is for me and my family, for our future. I'm going to protect it as such. You need to do what we agreed to.
And again, it lets them in a position where they know that you're paying attention to the property and to them as tenants. And so, once they realize that you are seriously maintaining the property and seriously maintaining your tenants, it's going to probably prevent other things that they might try to get away with later on.
Exactly. Number three, we're going to talk about monthly financial review. This is when you are going to review the financial statements on the property. So the income and expenses, you want to be generating those at the end of the month. We typically do it around the 3rd to the 5th of the month for the previous month, because then all the income and expenses would have cleared at that time and you have a clear view on it.
And it flags is obviously not paid.
Yeah. I mean, you should have known that rent wasn't getting paid way before that, but it gives you that clear view in terms of exactly what's happening. And one thing that you want to pay clear attention to is expenses. You want to notice if expenses are trending down, that's great. But if expenses are trending up, they are basically affecting the return on this property that you expected to get, right? Again, we're treating this like a business. So
Might help you find out what's causing that. Like, so we gave an example earlier about the toilet running and it increased the water, like charge a couple $100, but that's something that hadn't been reported. So you notice that on because you're paying attention to your financials, you can go investigate and figure out what's going on in the property.
exactly. You're going to be measuring that against the financial projections that you had for this unit when you underwrote and you understood the return that you should be getting. And then you can modify that picture. You know, a lot of landlords we find don't actually know what they're making or what they're losing. They just know that they collect rent and they pay bills, but they don't have a clear view of all of the income and expenses on the building. They don't know how profitable they are. And if you multiply those kinds of habits across a portfolio, it becomes a big liability, right?
And you could be costing yourself making lots of money.
Yeah, exactly. But that's something that's very important, especially for finding those issues, as Hannah mentioned, that water is one that we've seen a lot. And sometimes we've seen where landlords will actually include the utilities in the lease because it seems like a good idea when they write the lease. They're like, okay, we'll have $100 water charge and that will be that. But what happens when the water bill goes to 150, 200, 250 because there's a leak, or if there's additional people who moved into the unit, you're not tracking this stuff and you realize you're actually losing money now.
And then even if you it's already written into the lease if you were covering the water, but then at least you moving forward, that might need to be something you renegotiate if you're going to extend the lease, or if you're getting a new tenant and something you're going to want to change in terms of your procedures.
Exactly. Just an example, we do not recommend including water. Next.
Yeah. Rental and liability insurance. You want to make sure you have the right insurances in place.
This is more so related to making sure your tenants have that insurance in place. So we require that our tenants have liability insurance of at least $100,000. It doesn't matter what size of the unit is, but it needs to be at least $100,000. What that does is it provides for coverage in the event of accidents, their guests coming and being injured on the property, accidental damage to the property. If tenants should set the kitchen on fire, their insurance is going to answer to that before it falls on your insurance and becomes your problem. The other one is the rental insurance, requiring that tenants have their own rental insurance in place to cover their belongings, right? So you want to make sure that there's an adequate amount for the size of the property. For a normal size apartment, 1 to 2 bedrooms, $5,000 or so, but it depends. The market, the area, the type of unit, and what you think would adequately cover a tenant's belongings living in that kind of unit reasonably. And what that does is
We might want to even bump it just a little bit higher just to be extra cautious.
Yeah, it depends on where you are and the market and the types of apartments you're renting out. But if they are, say their belongings are damaged for some reason, say there's a disaster or something, there's a flood, their stuff gets damaged. If they don't have rental insurance in place that covers these things, they're coming to you. You're liable to be sued for replacing their belongings if they don't have rental insurance in place. So that's why you're actually requiring them to get their own insurance in place. And that's going to be covered in your lease agreement as a requirement.
And requiring that documentation that you want to keep in your files. So.
Sorry, another one on that. You want to be named as an additional insured or your property. If it's owned by you, you should be named as an additional insured on that rental on these insurance policies. If it's owned by an LLC, which we recommend, then the LLC should be named as an additional insured on the property so that it can be paid out. And the SS, that situation justifies that.
Lastly, you're going to want to harden your unit.
Harden your units, right? What does that mean? That means that you want to
make them bulletproof.
You want to make them as bulletproof as you can. For instance, carpet and rentals. There was a time when that was very, very popular, and some people still do like to do that. But carpet is likely to be replaced every couple of years in order to keep the unit fresh. You want to look at stuff like luxury tile, LVT, LVP flooring, luxury vinyl plank. The flooring that is almost indestructible. It handles leaks. It's waterproof. It's stain resistant. It's very hard. It's very almost impossible to damage it unless they're doing something that nobody should be doing in a building.
Countertops, want soft, like granite, not granite. Granite's great, but what's the other one I'm thinking of?
You're thinking about like,
Marble.
for my
No, I'm thinking marble, like if you were doing like a luxury and rental and people like the look of marble, but marble, is super easily stained. So things like that, you just want to stick to products, to materials that are going to be indestructible.
yeah, things that are going to hold up. So those are probably two areas that you want to pay the most attention to. That's going to cost you the big bucks. The flooring's huge. Anything where you can basically make sure that it's almost like kid proofing an apartment, right? Or a house. But you think about something that's easily stained, easily damaged, easily broken, and it's not great to have in a rental because chances are that will happen.
Or if there's something, I guess, that could potentially be dangerous, you just want to make sure you've also taken proactive measures to lessen that danger.
So I think that we have covered the risk mitigation portion of this. Again, there's a lot more that we could go into on this list, but these are the core things that are going to help you stay on the straight and narrow, stay in the green, and stay away from those issues that are going to make you lose money.
So let's see you again in video 7.